Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fascinating educational journey where we delve into the life and legacy of Hernando de Soto, one of history's most daring explorers. This is not just a story about voyages and discoveries. It's a tale of determination, hardship, and an unyielding quest for knowledge and new frontiers. Together, we will explore the remarkable events that unfolded between 1500 and 1542, shedding light on how these moments shaped our understanding of the world. Let's embark on this adventure and uncover the epic story of Hernando de Soto and the discovery of the Mississippi River. After the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus, the Spaniards, who initially believed he had found a new route to India, they were eagerly dreamed of its immense wealth. They were impatient to explore this land where they believed fortunes awaited them. Driven by a mad search for gold and adventure, many Spaniards were willing to leave their homes and friends for years. The most brilliant of these explorers were Hernán Cortés, the conqueror of Mexico, and Francisco Pizarro, the conqueror of Peru, both of whom carried back to Spain vast fortunes in gold and silver. Among Pizarro's men was a young and ambitious adventurer named Hernando de Soto. Hernando de Soto was born around 1500 to a poor but noble family. From a young age, he excelled in athletic sports and possessed remarkable skills in horsemanship and fencing. His adventurous spirit led him to the New World, where he not only won fame, but also amassed a significant fortune, returning to Spain as a wealthy man after years of exploration and conquest. While Cortés and Pizarro were conquering Mexico and Peru, other Spaniards sought their fortunes in Florida. Juan Ponce de León had discovered this land in 1513, naming it Pascua, Florida, in honor of Easter and the blooming flowers. Although these explorers had not yet found gold or silver, their faith in the mines of the interior was unwavering. De Soto, inspired by their persistence, wished to conquer and explore Florida himself. With his significant influence and achievements, De Soto secured the favor of the Spanish king, who appointed him governor of Cuba and leader of an expedition to conquer and occupy Florida. He was tasked with building forts and planting a colony to hold the land for Spain. De Soto had no difficulty in gathering followers for his enterprise. Young men from noble families flocked to his standard from all parts of Spain. Knowing the dangers and hardships they would face, he carefully selected the strongest men for his expedition. De Soto's company included richly dressed nobles and warriors in glittering armor. It was a grand day when they sailed out of port with banners flying and cannons booming, and not a young man among them felt anything but pride to be part of such a grand expedition. After arriving in Cuba, De Soto spent some time there before setting out to explore Florida, leaving his wife to govern the island in his absence. His expedition was an imposing one, consisting of 9 vessels, 600 men, and about 225 horses. In May 1539, the entire force landed at Tampa Bay on the western coast of Florida. Not long after advancing into the interior, De Soto encountered a Spaniard named Juan Ortiz, who had accompanied Panfilo de Narvaez on a previous expedition about a decade earlier. The Indians had captured Ortiz and only survived due to the intervention of an Indian girl who begged for his life. After living with the Indians for many years, Ortiz had become very much like one himself. We can imagine his joy at seeing fellow countrymen once more, and the Spaniards were equally delighted, knowing how valuable Ortiz would be as a guide and interpreter. However, the advantage of having Ortiz was soon counterbalanced by De Soto's unfriendliness towards the Indians. He was indifferent to their pleasures and sufferings, and even seemed to enjoy torturing and killing them. His usual practice upon arriving at an Indian settlement was to demand food for his men and horses, and then take the head chief as a guide and hostage until the next tribe was reached. Indian men and women were forced into service as porters for the Spanish baggage. Enslaved, often with chains and iron collars around their necks, they were compelled to do all sorts of menial work. It is no wonder that the Indians soon lost all trust in De Soto. They not only learned to hate him and the Spaniards, but also longed for revenge. In retaliation for the cruelties inflicted upon them, they purposely led the Spaniards astray and engaged in various acts of treachery to destroy the pale-faced strangers. In May 1540, an Indian princess rowed across a stream in a canopied canoe to meet De Soto. Her followers carried her in a litter, from which she alighted and approached him, offering presents of shells, skins, and a string of pearls she took from around her neck. In return for these acts of courtesy, De Soto made her a prisoner and forced her to accompany him on foot until she managed to escape. This incident is just one example of the cruelty that turned the Indians against the Spaniards. Indian runners likely traveled hundreds of miles to warn other tribes of the inhuman deeds of the white man, and these tribes likely combined their efforts in a desperate attempt to destroy De Soto and his men. They came very close to succeeding. In the autumn of 1540, the Spaniards arrived at the tribe of a giant chieftain who was carried by his slaves on a raised platform under a buckskin umbrella stained red and white. Although sullen in the presence of the richly dressed Spaniards on their prancing steeds, he allowed De Soto to take him prisoner to the next Indian town, just as the other head chiefs had done. This town, called Mavia, is the origin of the name Mobile, used for the city and river in Alabama. As the Spaniards approached, Indians came out to meet them with displeasure and evil intent visible on their faces. Undeterred, De Soto, attended by about a dozen men, boldly rode inside the town, which was surrounded by a barrier. The giant chieftain requested his release, which was denied. He then entered a house where many Indian warriors were concealed. When De Soto ordered him to come out, he refused. In the ensuing commotion, a Spaniard killed an Indian warrior standing nearby. This triggered a wild fury, and hundreds of Indian warriors rushed out to attack, killing 5 of De Soto's bodyguards. De Soto himself had to flee for his life. But before he could reach the main force outside the town, he fell multiple times, struck by Indian arrows. This incident marked the beginning of a fierce battle. Despite being outnumbered, the Spaniards had the advantage due to their horses, swords, firearms, and superior training. They closed the town gates from the outside and set fire to the Indian buildings. The Indians fought desperately, but most either fell to Spanish swords or rushed into the flames to perish. By nightfall, only 3 Indian warriors remained alive. 2 fought until they were killed, and the last hanged himself with his bowstring. The Spaniards claimed they killed at least 2,500 Indians, but they lost about a third of their men in the process. It was a costly victory. Indian resistance was not the only challenge De Soto's men faced. They had to travel through thick forests with no roads, following narrow paths made by wild animals or trails left by Indian hunters. Many days were spent laboriously picking their way through dense underbrush and swamps, often stopping to build rafts to cross numerous streams. Often without food and on the brink of starvation, they were forced to eat native dogs and at times survived on berries, nuts, bear oil, and wild honey. Despite hunger, disease, death, and numerous other hardships, De Soto continued his relentless search for gold. After nearly 2 years of trekking through tangled forests, he finally reached the banks of the mighty Mississippi River in the spring of 1541. Spending months building boats, he eventually crossed the river and continued his march northward and westward, reaching as far as what is now Little Rock, Arkansas. Marching southeast, possibly to the Ouachita River, he spent a harsh winter that claimed many lives, including Ortiz. By mid-April 1542, De Soto's party, exhausted and disheartened, reached the mouth of the Red River. There, De Soto, broken in spirit and suffering from fever, fell gravely ill and soon died. Initially, his followers buried his body near their settlement. But when the Indians began examining the ground suspiciously, the Spaniards, under cover of darkness, exhumed the body. They wrapped it in blankets weighted with sand and solemnly lowered it into the waters of the Mississippi River, which De Soto had been the first European to discover. After enduring many more hardships, the surviving members of this ill-fated expedition, numbering little more than half of those who had originally landed at Tampa Bay, eventually made their way to a Spanish colony in Mexico. Thus ended a journey that had begun with such high hopes of wealth and renown, ending instead in tragedy and loss. Thank you for watching. Remember, you are an essential part of our community. If you found this video insightful or thought-provoking, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel for more dose of informative and educational videos.